New developments related to Jeffrey Epstein this morning. The co-executors of his estate announced late Thursday that they have agreed to settle a class action lawsuit filed by the survivors of his abuse for $35 million. The deal still has to be approved by a judge. That money would be in addition to the restitution fund that Epstein's estate paid out $121 million to victims, and the $49 million that the estate paid in additional settlements. Now, as part of the settlement, neither executor made any admission of concession of misconduct. Their lawyer said in a statement that the settlement would provide a, quote, confidential avenue for financial relief for Epstein victims who have not already resolved claims against Epstein's estate.
That news comes amid the fallout from former Prince Andrew's arrest yesterday on suspicion of misconduct in public office related to his ties to Jeffrey Epstein. It's the first time in nearly 400 years that a member of the royal family has been arrested. Andrew was held by police for about 11 hours before he was released under investigation, meaning he was neither charged nor exonerated. Royal biographer Andrew Lowney tells our sister network, News Nation, that this is uncharted territory for the royals. He says if Andrew were treated like any other person under these circumstances, charges would be laid out, a lawyer assigned, and a trial date set. And that is precisely what the palace fears most. That's reportedly sparked fears that Andrew could flee to a country that does not have an extradition treaty with the UK, like the United Arab Emirates, where Andrew's ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson, was recently spotted.
Meantime, American lawyers on both sides applauded Andrew's arrest, including the two congressmen who wrote the Epstein Files Transparency Act. Congressman Ro Khanna, writing on X in part, even princes are not above the law. And Kentucky Congressman Thomas Massie echoed that in a post of his own, but took it a step further, writing, quote, Prince Andrew was just arrested. This was the metric I established for success of the Epstein Files Transparency Act that Ro Khanna and I got passed. Now we need justice in the United States. It's time for Pam Bondi and Kash Patel to act. But when the president was asked about Andrew's arrest, he seemed to have a more sympathetic take. Let's listen.
I think it's a shame. I think it's very sad. I think it's so bad for the royal family. It's a very, very sad. To me, it's a very sad thing. When I see that, it's a very sad thing to see it and to see what's going on with his brother, who's obviously coming to our country very soon, and he's a fantastic man, the king. So I think it's a very sad thing.
The family of Virginia Giuffre said that they were overjoyed by the news of the arrest.
You may remember Giuffre, the most prominent of Andrew's accusers, died by suicide last year. Her brother, Sky Roberts, added that he thinks his sister would be celebrating the small victory along with them if she were still alive, but would be pushing for more accountability in both the United Kingdom and the United States based on the files.
A lot of people were, I think, rightfully upset about the president saying he feels very sad, or it's a sad situation for Andrew. I mean, people...
Well, he didn't say for Andrew, though. I think people are misinterpreting. I think he's talking about the shame that Andrew's behavior has brought to the royal family and to King Charles, and that was the sad situation. Because he never said, I'm sad about Andrew or I'm sad about the arrest, and I think people misinterpreted.
Okay, but even with the royal... I think the biggest thing is the sadness for any victims that were tied to any of this, right? That's what I think the overwhelming feeling that people want to hear. Sure, maybe directly from the president, as opposed to the word hoax and other words that we hear. He knows that they're victims, and I don't know that flat out we've heard him say, you know, the words that acknowledge the victims. Even when Pam Bondi had her hearing, she was asked, and I know that Democrats were trying to make a scene by having her turn around and apologize to the victims for not taking a meeting with them. But just the idea that these people are acknowledged and relevant, and that at least some of their stories are real and should be accepted as real, and we should investigate them thoroughly and provide some sense of justice. I mean, that's the Justice Department's actual job. But I think, you know, when you think about the way that the president's grappling with how sad it is for the family seems like they understand how bad this is. I mean, they stripped him of his royal titles. They kicked him out of his official residence. So this was months before we're seeing an arrest. They understand no one's been arrested in that family, as we mentioned, for 400 years, that they need to get ahead of this. So I don't think that they're just doing these things based on the history of the royal family and how calculated they were and have been. I don't think that they're doing these things unless they knew that something else could come down the pike. And now that we're seeing this, it's like, well, if his closest people in his life knew that this might be an option, you know, maybe there's something worth looking into. And so when Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie say they consider this part of the victory And this is the type of example, and Robbie and I often debate about this. What do you want from these Epstein files being released? What's the result? Well, the result is if there's anyone else that's similar to a prince in the UK, in the US, that was deeply involved in any way, or perhaps whether it was catching them because they were illegally corresponding, which is part of Andrew's claims, is that he was having correspondence from 2001 to 11 with Epstein that was violating what he's supposed to do in that position. But whatever it is that has a lot of, paints the picture for people to understand what may have happened in 2019 when Epstein was going to be on trial for a possible sex trafficking operation. People want to know what that trial would look like, and we'll never know. So I think partially finding out who else was connected in these ways is some sense of justice for several victims.
No, I totally agree. They should exhaust every investigatory avenue to try to bring possible co-conspirators or clients of Epstein's trafficking ring to justice. Unfortunately, there have been also a lot of missteps from people who are seeking that justice in their interpretation and commentary about the Epstein files. And going back to that Trump hoax comment, at the time, I was similarly horrified and very critical of the president for the way that he was talking about these files. But now that I've seen this play out a bit more, I'm actually a bit more sympathetic to that view, because we had Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie going on the floor of the House and saying quite vociferously that this list of names of various millionaires and billionaires had somehow been involved in the Epstein minor sex trafficking ring, that these people were effectively pedophiles, that they needed to be held accountable. Ro Khanna read their names out loud, doing so on the House floor, of course, because he couldn't face defamation, a defamation suit, because he's protected by that veil. And then it turned out that those people were just part of a police lineup, and actually there was no other evidence that they were part of this game besides Les Wexner, apparently. According to his latest deposition, he did deny those allegations. But that was a huge, huge mistake for Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie. And so if this is going to turn into a witch hunt of anyone whose name is in the files is automatically guilty, that's not helpful for securing justice either.
Right. And we only have a little bit of time, but I think there's so much to talk about here, from the FBI and the redactions the DOJ say they got from the FBI and how they handed it to Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie and explained. If some of that would have been explained in advance, maybe he wouldn't have taken the step to go say those names on the House floor. It's also, I don't like when people act first and ask questions later.
Right.
So there's a lot here, and I think that all of it clouds the most important thing. And I also don't want to defame people that have nothing to do with stuff. So I think that it's really important. But I think that this whole thing could have been handled better, starting from how they're communicating with Congress, whose job is oversight.
Sure. Yeah. No, I totally agree. All right. Up next, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez continues to face heat for her response about a question about Taiwan. Coming up, hear what President Trump and Vice President Vance had to say about it.